Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel that's titled Yarn, Needles, and Life. My name is Deborah, and I'm coming to you from sunshiny, very hot and humid Florida in the month of July. I hope all of you are doing well. I hope y'all are making it through this heat wave that seems to be occurring everywhere across the United States, and that we all have something on our knitting needles or our crochet hooks that makes us happy and helps us pass the days away in some of those hot hours while we sit either underneath some air conditioning or fans or both, as I tend to do. This is, I don't know what episode this is. I don't keep track of them. I do my videos at random. I hope that you will come and join me on my little video pods. I'd like to say up front that I don't use professional equipment. I have either my cell phone or tablet that I use to video the videos. And I don't edit. So what you see is what you get. I hope that I will bring some smiles and some laughter to your life and possibly some ideas as well. For those of you who have watched me before, thank you for coming back and watching me again. Thank you to the subscribers that have subscribed to my channel. I hope that you have gleaned some wonderful piece of information or ideas from my videos. And, for the most part, we are all people and we all have things in our lives that can be difficult and things that are very joyous, and we get through each one by the grace of God. So with no further ado, I am going to get into this podcast. I've been busy. The last video I put up, I believe I was dyeing some yarn, and that turned out wonderful. Particularly because I had just received my Swift and my yarn baller, and they made life so much easier when it came to winding yarn, because in the past I've been putting two chairs back to back and doing it that way, and it's very difficult. So I'd like to show you the yarn that I dyed, and pardon the racket, but I wound it up into cakes, and here is one of them. It is oranges and yellows, and yellows that fade into a deeper yellow that makes it look almost orange. I don't think it's showing up quite right on the video, but it's turned out very pretty. They're 100-gram cakes. I think there's 200 yards in them, and they are 100% merino wool. They're not super washed, so I'm going to have to make something out of them that I make sure that I hand wash them. They will not go to gift. This is my other one, and I love this one. I named it Kaleidoscope because it has got colors of oranges and yellows and light lavenders and light blues. And I dyed this all at, well, no, I didn't dye it all in the same dye pot. I used different dye pots with different colors, and I quick dipped it into each color, and I let it bleed onto the previous color so that I had some fading effect going on. At the most, I left the yarn in the dye pot for 5 minutes. It wasn't very long, and I got plenty of saturation, and it turned out just like I wanted it to. And this also is a 100-gram hank of 100% merino wool, not superwash, and it too will have to be knitted up or crocheted up into something that has to be hand washed, so it will not be gifted. But I was real happy with them. It was a first time experience trying the different baths of color, and I did use food coloring. I used Wilton's food coloring to dye these, and the recipe is, I winged it. I don't measure when it comes to the dye, because Wilton's, for anyone who has used it, is like a gel form. It's not powdered. So, and it's a thick gel. So measuring it is really, really difficult, or I find it to be so, but maybe it's just I don't have the proper tools. But then I also added like 8 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of distilled vinegar, white vinegar, to the dye. And that's how I do my formula. You need, if you're using dyeing techniques, some people use citric acid in a powder form. I just simply get all of my products out of the grocery store aisle. So it's food coloring and white distilled vinegar and just plain old household water. I also have purchased some packs of Kool-Aid, and I am going to try my hand at dyeing with Kool-Aid. I've watched one young lady numerous times, and she has a really nice video YouTube channel, and her name, she goes by Kim Knits, CHEMKINTS. I believe she said she has her degree in biology or chemistry. You know, she has an impressive degree. I can't remember exactly what it's in, but she does a tremendous amount of dyeing of yarn, and she uses numerous and various different types of mediums of dyes, whether it be Kool-Aid, um, cold drinks, like your orange cold drinks and your strawberry cold drinks. She has used candy that's left over from Valentine's Day, the red hearts, the red hot candies. Um, Also Easter egg dyeing, as well as your typical indie dye material that is powdered and it's chemical, and you need to use a mask when you wear it. When it comes to Kool-Aid and candy and food coloring, no, there's not an issue of it being harmful for you to breathe or for you to eat if there's some residue left over. I use the typical pots and pans in the kitchen, and sometimes, depending upon the color that I use, it may kind of stain the stainless steel pot that I use, but I found that with a little bit of soaking in Dawn dish soap in some hot water, the film comes off and it's gone. So there's no staining of my dyeing kitchenware. So that is my dyeing episode, and I had promised in my last video that I would come back and show you the end results, and I'm very, very happy with them. And if you want to see the first one, if you'll just go back to my last video, it was at the beginning of July, I believe also, you will find me there. Excuse me. So, other than dyeing yarn, I have been knitting, as usual, or crocheting. I have a shawl back here in the back that I finished up crocheting. The pattern is my own, just your basic double crochets and yarn overs. But that was very fun to knit. It is 2 skeins of Lion Brand. I believe it's the ombre yarn. It's very, very soft. Very soft. And I've been happy with it. The next thing that I've been working on, there's several things that I work on, because like most knitters or possibly crocheters, I'm not a monogamous person when it comes to my knitting and crocheting. I have multiple things on the hooks and needles at one time, and I get bored easily. So I flip-flop from one to the other, and eventually they all end up getting completed, and I'm happy. It's easier for me to do it that way than to get through one and then sit and hunt and hunt and hunt. Well, what is the next thing that I'm going to do? What would I really like to do? I've got plenty of yarn. I think most of us do have some type of a stash. You know, for a while I didn't have much of any yarn, and I just kind of made do with what I had, but things have changed a little bit, and I've been able to catch some yarn on sale that I could actually get. Um, Anyhow, this one is my just hot off the needles. Let's see, I finished them up yesterday, Sunday, maybe Saturday evening. It is a vanilla sock. I knit it from the toe up. It's got, I don't know, 10 or 15 row 2x2 rib topping on it. The heel is the Flegel heel that I use, and um, the lady that designed it, she is Freedom. She goes by Freedom something. I'll see if I can find it and I'll put it in the show notes. But if you Google Flegel, Fleegle, heel, it will come up, and she has a couple different designs for a heel, and I use her original design for the Flegel heel. And it's simply that when I get to the front of the heel, I start increasing to a double amount of my stitches on that second needle. So if I have 34 stitches, I actually increase round and around, knitting around the whole sock. I increase a stitch on each side of the heel. So I do a total of 32 increases, just too short of my original 34 that I began with. So then I end up with 66 stitches, and then I start decreasing. And it's, once I caught it and got it straight in my head, it is the simplest thing to do. I don't have to carry around a pattern with me, and the heel fits me nicely. I don't ever have to worry about my heel not fitting perfectly. It always does. So, and then I just continued my basic stockinette stitch all the way up until my 2x2 ribbing. My toe, I try to do a rounded toe version. I don't like a pointy toe, and I hate, the reason why I started doing toe up socks was I didn't like the Kitchener stitch that I had to do when I got to the end of the toe from a cuff down. So I found a recipe on Ravelry, and it's just a recipe, and I've deviated from the original a little bit, but I cast on, for instance, on this one, I cast on 14 stitches on each needle because I used the magic loop. I knit my first round, then on my second round I started increasing, and when I increased, I knit the first stitch, I did a yarn over for my increase, and then I knit to one stitch before the end of that row. I did another yarn over and knitted the last stitch, and then the same thing on the second needle. Then I go back around, and my yarn overs, I pick them up in the back of the stitch. I don't pick them up in the front of the yarn over. I go into the back of the yarn over, and that way I have no hole there, and there's no gap. And I do that on each one of my yarn overs all the way around, and then on my third round I do another yarn over at the after I knit the first stitch. So it turns out really nicely. I'm really happy with it. This is the way it looks off of the sock blocker, and this is the front of it. It's not as round as what I typically do, but I've variated a little bit on this sock. So typically it's just it's rounded all the way around, but you can't tell it once it's on. So that's nice. And I know this is awfully dark, but the gusset in the heel turns out really nice as well. And then I have had Happy Mail, and we all love Happy Mail. I have, in the past, I have bought two types of circular needles, and I prefer circular needles. Actually, three types. I have a set of Knit Picks, interchangeables that I really, really like. They were my first set of what I call real needles, and I know that's not the case. All needles are real, but they were my first nice set of knitting needles and interchangeables, and I absolutely love them. I've had no problems with them. I like the cords that come with them, and I like the fact that you can order additional cords in whatever sizes that you want, and they're relatively inexpensive. You can get them for $2 and under per cord whenever they're on sale. I think regular price is like $2. So I've enjoyed those. The other ones that I've purchased at a local yarn store that's about 50 miles away from where I live is the Chigoos. And I do the red lace tip, which is a very pointy tip. I prefer a pointy tip on all of my knitting needles. I find that I don't have a problem with splitting yarn. I can get my stitches moved across the needles and onto the next needle easier. Um, I tend to be a tight knitter, so I have to really talk to myself when I'm knitting to loosen up my tension. So the um, the red lace of the Chigoos help a lot. I love the cable that they're attached to. It has basically no memory, but it has enough memory that it's not a limp needle, okay? But when you're knitting with it, it's not wrapping around itself and twisting and just being a real pain. It is a very, very nice nice cable that's attached to that needle. Very, very sturdy. It would hold a lot of weight because it actually has a steel cable inside of the interior of the cable itself, so it's got a lot of sturdiness to it. I also purchased Hayas, the sharps, and they are sharp. Those I have been known to draw blood on my fingers with the needle tips. They're very lovely to knit with. I really like them. My only complaint with them is that the cord that they put to them has too much memory in it. It's a very fine cord, so you would think that it didn't, but it actually kind of reminds me of a heavier fishing line for those who are familiar with fishing and fishing poles and the nylon that you use to uh, put your hooks on. But anyhow, the Hayas are a really nice needle as well. I just prefer that when I'm knitting magic loop on my socks, I prefer Chagoo. Now, for years, I have wanted to own a set of Chagoo interchangeables. And as we all know, those of us that crochet and knit, our tools can be very pricey and we can't always have what we want. And I happen to be surfing through the internet on some various websites with yarn and needles and accessories for knitters and crocheters, and I came onto one, and I cannot remember the name of the website. I'm sorry, and I don't know, maybe I do have the invoice of where it came from. um, I figured I'd put the price of the original cost of these needles inside the pocket so that when I die, hopefully my kids won't just sell them in a yard sale for $1. Then they know they're worth a little bit more than that. Um, I purchased these interchangeable set from Die Hard Yarns, and the order came very quickly. I was very happy with them, with the purchase of them. It was very smooth, easy process. And the other thing was that I wasn't quite sure from the description if this was a complete set, because a lot of times knitting needles will come in half sets, like you get your lower sizes in one group and your higher size needles or crochet hooks in another one, and they're pretty pricey to do it that way and to do them individually. But to buy a whole set is also very costly, so you do what you can. Anyhow, I stumbled across them, and this particular website was having a 50% off sale. So I ordered, not immediately. I thought about it. I went off the website, thought about it for a while, went back on, looked at them again, and saw that they only had one set left. And I saw that they were 50% off. Now, those of you who have looked at these know that they're costly. And few of us can ever, there's many of us that can't purchase a set. And the only reason, it was just a fluke that I was able to. So I ordered the set, and here it is. It is a complete set of interchangeable ChiaoGoo needles, sizes US 2 through a US 15. I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled with this needle. And if you can see, that's the end that you thread the cord onto. The cables that come with it, there's 3 different sizes. Actually, there's 6 cables. 3 of them are for the smaller needles, which is the size 2 through size 8. And then the other 3 cables are for the 9 through 15s. The screw-on part is a different size for the two different size groups, which I found interesting. The needles are light as a feather, and they're slick. They're just as nice and smooth as they can be. And the cable joins are fabulous. ChiaoGoo got the cable design on this set of needles perfect. You couldn't ask for anything more, and I am just thrilled to pieces with it. Along with it came, of course, their needle sizer, and the end stoppers for the cables if you need to take your needles off the cable to work with that size needle on a different project. And it also came with some stitch markers, and I really like them. You know, they did a really, really nice job, and they sent an instruction with it. So, I mean, on how to use the needles. Let's see, how to put the needles onto the cables and how to tighten them and this, that, and the other. And then they came with the two packages of 3 different sizes of cables for the large set of needles and the small set of needles. So that was really good. They did a really nice job. My hat's off to ChiaoGoo. They did good. They did good work, and you don't see that all the time in life anymore. The quality of workmanship and the thought of how the end user is going to enjoy these needles, they took all of that into consideration, in my opinion. And these are just my opinions. I'm not paid by anybody or endorsed by anybody to say any of these things. So curiosity got the best of me, and I listened to Stacy on Berry Pink Knitter, and she had some ChiaoGoo's shorties. Okay, let's face it. We all think, wonder how those work. Well, I ordered them, and I got them on Amazon. So I ordered the ChiaoGoo Twist Minis. And when I say minis, I mean minis. This is the 2-inch needle. Here they are attached to a cable. And then actually in this set, they came with 2, a 2-inch needle and a 3-inch needle tip. And they're twist short combos. US ones, and they had two different sizes of cable lengths. One is 5" and the other one is 6". Okay, I've tried these. I think it's a fabulous concept, but the jury's still out on what I think about them. Okay, it's not that there's a problem in the manufacturing of them, because there isn't. They're just as well made as the larger needles. The issue for me is the shortness of the needle itself. The 2" is very short. I actually knit a little bit with the 3" needle yesterday, and I knew immediately when I started trying them that this 5 and 6" cable is not my cup of tea. It's too tight for me. I know a lot of people do knit in the round, and they have a little 9" going on, and they say it's fabulous for knitted hats in the round, and blah 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 blah. Well, that may be, but I need room. I need room to be able to move my work around, to be able to see my stitches. So I'm not real sure about all this. But I got online and ordered another cable from Amazon. And it actually is a 30" cable. And it's for the twist. And I put it on the 3" needles. These are size 1 needles, and they work fine. There's not a flaw in them at all. I just am not sure that I can comfortably knit with this short of a needle. Now, I know a lot of people do, and they love it, and they say, it helps them with their speed and this, that, and the other. And I can see where it would help if you're knitting in a small circumference and you're not having to, fiddle with your cable. I don't mind fiddling with my cable. The thing of it is I don't knit for speed. I'm not all about production. I'm about the process and the enjoyment of the process. I find knitting to be relaxing and very satisfying for me personally. I like to see the end result and be able to sit back and say, that's great. I made that, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I don't enjoy knitting items for money. I have a couple times, and I found it to be very frustrating, very tedious. I questioned myself a lot. Was the customer going to be happy with the end result? I don't typically question my end results. Well, for one thing, if I don't like what I see, I just rip it out, and I'm the queen of rip out and frogging. Ribbit is my middle name. But like I said, the jury's still out on these little mini needles, and they don't give them away, that's for sure. But I'm going to continue with them and try them out and see how it goes. On the socks that I knitted, that I showed you, the yarn that I used was Malabrigo, and it was the Wales Road color. And I did not realize it because the original skein that I purchased from a local yarn shop, like I said, that's 50 miles away from me. And it was the first time I'd ever bought any Malabrigo. And I didn't know that their colors are continuous. I didn't know much about the yarn other than it felt really good. It was 75% merino wool superwash with 25% nylon. It was a sock yarn. There was 400 I think there's 436 yards in it. Now, I've knit 2 socks, and this is how much I have left. Now, my socks, I don't make the tops of them real long. They're not shorties, but they don't go up real far up my leg because I don't want them to. There's no need for them to go way up my leg. So, I probably knit them from the back of the heel where it ends, which would be what I would call the top of the heel, to the ribbing. The ending of the ribbing is probably about 4 inches. So, I could probably get another sock or two. Or maybe just some shorty socks out of what's left over. But I'm going to wait and see. I do have another skein of this Malabrigo Wales Road that I purchased just a few weeks ago and came. So I've got enough to do a nice shawl. Or I could maybe knit a cute hat out of what's left over. I don't know. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought. I've just kind of kicked around different ideas. The other thing that I have on my needles right now is a lace shawl. And I'm just about finished with it. I'm on row 102 of 109. And it's a semicircle shawl. Excuse me. And it's very nice. It's got drop stitches and yarn overs and knits. It's just all knit. It's garter stitch, yarn over, and drop stitches. So you can't get any easier than that. It says to use a size 6 needle, which I did. And my cable on my needles is a 50-inch cable because this thing is big as far as lengthwise goes. And it says to use a US 10 needle. Oh, well, I used a US 6, so that has something to do right now with what size that it's coming out. Okay, and it says to use 2 cakes of a cotton tape in the color of curry, and each cake is 336 yards. Well, I didn't do that. I guess I should have read the directions a little bit more, because I was thinking, it sure isn't turning out very big, and I knew it required quite a bit of yardage of yarn, and I was like, man, this has 109 rows, and I'm on 102 right now, and it's not as big as what it's saying it should be. So I thought, well, I'll do another complete set of rows to make it bigger. Well, since I'm using size 6 needles instead of a size 10, that would have something to do with it. But the yarn that I'm using is from Hobbii, Hobbii. And it is their Cotton King Twirls. It's 100% cotton. It is 874 yards. And this is it. It goes from a dark purple and gradients out to a lighter purple. And it's very pretty. And it's like the Red Heart. It's a wrap rainbow. It's just four strands of cotton thread side by side, and you knit with them. They aren't twisted. So crocheting with them with this is easier, I have found, to crochet with it than it is to knit with it. It's easy to miss one of those little tiny pieces of thread, and that's what it is. It's just thread. I don't care what they call it, it's thread. And they're just laid piece by piece to where they're 4 pieces of thread thick. But I've had to go back out and do some things, and I will block it. But it's supposed to be like, let me see here. what size of it is supposed to be when it's finished. And this was a free pattern. It's called Midsummer. And it's very pretty. And it's not doing well on my monitor. I can tell that already. But it's crescent shaped. And it's supposed to be 90 inches across and 20 inches deep. So, I'd like for my shawls or scarves to be deeper than what they typically are on a pattern. So, I'm planning on, I have plenty of yarn left over. So, I'm going to do another whole 108 rows of this pattern a second time to get it to be the size that I would like for it to be. So that's going to be fun. And it's been, as far as difficulty, it hasn't been difficult. The difficult part has been using the type of fiber that I choose to use, a cotton thread fiber. That has been the difficult part. The pattern itself is super simple. I would suggest, if you have ever used them before, and if you haven't, that you may consider doing it, putting in a lifeline. You know, even if you knit 10 rows and have no problems on that 10th row, put it in a lifeline, knit another 10 rows, put it in a lifeline, because I have had to rip back a couple times, and on this particular pattern, with it being so lacy, it can be very difficult to pick up your stitches and when you have to frog back for any amount of rows, just because there's a lot of yarn overs, there's a lot of drop stitches that you do in this to get your big airy pieces in it. So that's just something to think about. But it is called Midsummer, and excuse me, I'm not sure. I got it online, and it says DR, I believe it says Krika Designs, but you could type in Midsummer and it's Midsommar, and that is MID, D as in dog, SOMMAR, and it's a crescent shaped shawl, and it doesn't require any counting. It says just follow along with the easy set of drop stitch, eyelet, stockinette, and garter stitch sections, and it's easy. So you know, it might be something that you'd enjoy knitting for a summer project, and something that you could take along with you. You do have to focus some, but not. There's several times that there's numerous rows that it's just repeating the same thing over and over. It's knit 2, on the 3rd stitch you knit front and back, that's your increase, and then you knit all the way across to 3 stitches to the end, and then you do a knit front and back and knit the last 2 stitches. So there's sometimes 4 or 5 rows that you do that of, and you know, that's pretty much mindless knitting. You don't have to think about anything. So anyhow, those are my projects. Those are my new acquisitions. They're my fun mail, and we all enjoy our fun mail. So I'm going to ask you what's on your needles. I have the shawl on my needles. I've got probably a couple other things going, and I can't remember what they are. Oh, I do know one of them is a scrappy blanket that I've been knitting on, and right now I'm not knitting on it. It's to a point where it's gotten big enough that it has to lay on my lap, and it's just too warm of weather to do it, and I am literally making it out of my leftover scraps of yarn from other things that I've done over a period of time. So I'm trying to use the same thickness of weight, like a 3 weight But that doesn't always happen, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's just going to be one of those lovely blankets that you can just drag around with you anywhere and curl up under and snuggle up under and stay warm. And there's no rhyme or reason to the color that I use. I just wound up leftover yarn into balls, and I just pick a ball and knit till the end of it. And sometimes that's 2 rows, sometimes it's 3 rows worth of knitting, but it's coming along well, and I'll pick it back up in the fall and start knitting on it again, like I said, when it's a little cooler weather. So I've been trying to get my room organized some with my yarn, and that's been coming along good. One thing I've noticed is that when your yarn is out of sight, you tend to kind of forget what you got and how much you have, or if you need some more of a particular color. So that's been a learning thing since I've started getting myself organized a little bit better. But you got to do something, you got to contain it, because if you don't, it can just run away rampant with you. I'm also trying to be more mindful of my yarn purchases. I have noticed that the fiber industry is making some changes, and when I say the fiber industry, I think probably the biggest one that I'm thinking of is Red Heart and Lion Brand, Caron, Yarnspirations, and you have your loops and threads, and I love that yarn from Hobby Lobby and Michaels and Joann's. This is what I'm noticing. And when I first started knitting, I made my yarn purchases on how much yardage I could get for my dollar, because I had very, very limited money to spend on yarn, and I wanted to get, for lack of better words, to describe the biggest bang for my buck that I could get. I tend to gravitate towards your finer yarns in weight size. I'm saying like fingering yarn. I like fingering yarn. I like sport weight. I like the fact that they knit up very pretty. I like the texture of them. Bulky yarns cost you more. You get very little yardage, but you do get a project that knits up extremely quickly, particularly if it's like a hat. Now, I can either knit, I don't know, 4 hats out of some Bernat yarn from their baby department, like maybe a 1-pounder. I could probably get more than 4 hats. I haven't done it, so I don't know exactly the amount. Or I can get 1 hat from a bulky skein of Lion Brand Homestyle yarn, let's just say, out of the top of my head. I can get 1 hat out of it, and it's 100 yards for $5.99. So it all depends upon how quickly you want to get your satisfaction out of seeing the finished project, and actually how you want the finished project to turn out. Sometimes you want a bulky hat, other times you want a more detailed hat or lighter weight hat to be able to wear during the winter time. So it's just all your preference. I always look at my yarn in this manner. How many yards am I getting per dollar? I am noticing that the big box stores and the big name brand yarns are including some natural fibers into them, either cotton, or they're doing a little bit of alpaca or a little bit of merino wool, and they're really jacking up the price because they've got 20% wool in them or 10% alpaca. And alpaca is not cheap. It's not a cheap fiber. And wool is not a cheap fiber, and cotton is not a cheap fiber. Believe it or not, cotton is expensive. But I don't want to pay top dollar for 400 yards of yarn that has 10% or 20% wool in it when I can buy 436 yards of yarn that has got 80% super merino wool, superwash, and maybe 10% cashmere and another 15% nylon in there for $18 to $20, sometimes less than that. But I'm getting natural fibers. I'm not getting acrylic in my yarn. I am not going to pay good money for plastic. And that's what acrylic is. It's made out of plastic. I like acrylic, don't get me wrong. I use Walmart's brand Mainstays that they've come out with. I really enjoy crocheting and knitting with it. I'm very happy with it. I'm not a snob when it comes to fibers. I like color. I am driven by three things: color, cost, and the weight of the yarn and yardage. That's four. I can't count. But those are what drives my purchases. I try to purchase enough yarn in a quantity that if I decided that I wanted to make a sweater for myself, that I can do that. So I purchase anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 yards of yarn. Not every time, but a big majority of the time I purchase that amount of quantity in one yarn and what the color that I'm choosing to make something out of. So, now I'm not gonna, I would, I guess, if I could, but I can't. Um, I'm not in that financial realm that I could do it. I could not go out and purchase 2,000 yards of super merino, superwash merino wool with some cashmere and some nylon in it. I couldn't do that. I can't go out and make a $150 purchase on yarn to make a garment out of. And even if I could, I'm not sure I would, because I don't do that when I shop for clothing, period, and I never have, even when I could afford to. I've always tried to be a conservative shopper and get as much for my money as I possibly could. So, um, that's when it gets down to that point, that's a very personal choice. We all know what our financial situation is and what we can afford, what we can maybe splurge on because we've been given a gift of money for a special occasion like our birthday or whatever. So that's something to take into consideration. There's a whole lot of variables, but I am noticing a big change in the fiber industry, in the big names: Red Heart, Loops and Threads, Joann's brand, and I can't think of the name of it at this moment, and Hobby Lobbies. They've included some natural fiber in their acrylics, and they've used that to justify the huge increase in cost of the material. And I'd rather be able to save up my money and buy something of actually really good quality, that doesn't have any acrylic content in it, than to spend a fair amount of money on something that's acrylic, and it's in the long run it's plastic, and I know it's costs money to make it into yarn, but still. So anyhow, that's enough rambling on about the prices of yarn. It's just something that I thought that I would mention. And I have one other thing that I would like to address, and hopefully I won't say a whole lot about it. I found out just by accident that Ravelry has a new policy, and I have a Ravelry account. I don't write patterns, and I don't. If I did, I wouldn't post them on Ravelry anyhow. But I don't. I don't write patterns, so there's no patterns for me to post onto Ravelry. I don't keep track of my stash on Ravelry. I only use Ravelry to um, locate patterns that I might be interested in, and seeing what other people, types of yarn other people have used on that, making that particular pattern. So that is the extent of my Ravelry use. I don't belong to groups. I don't post in groups. None of that. Okay. So I would like to say that this doesn't impact me, but it does impact me, and it impacts all of us that use Ravelry. And we all are entitled to our own beliefs and our own thoughts and opinions on things. This is America, and we have that right. And I pray that we will always have that right. Um, I don't have a problem with Ravelry saying no politics discussed on the forums, no political um, patterns being, uploaded onto Ravelry. Apparently, they don't like Trump, and I get it. A lot of people don't like Trump. There's a lot of people that do like Trump. Okay, um, we we're in America. We're a free country. We're not a communist country. We're not a socialist country. We're not a dictatorship. We get to vote, and our vote does count. However, I believe that we have gotten, or not just believe, I've seen that we've come to a spot in our society that it seems that those who claim they are tolerant are some of the least tolerant people of all. I was born in the late 1950s, so I, like many others, came up in an entirely different generation, in an entirely different way that our world operated here within the United States. I also was raised in a Christian home, and I have Christian values, and I have Christian beliefs, and I try to be as thoughtful and respectful towards people. It doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. It doesn't matter what their church affiliation is. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. It doesn't matter what their financial status is. And it doesn't matter to me what they feel like their gender is. Okay? I went to visit my doctor, I don't know, a year ago, and it was the beginning of the year, and they had this whole questionnaire that the nurse needed to ask me a whole group of questions on, I don't know, various things. I guess government was wanting to do a survey, and she said, how do you recognize your sexual orientation? And I looked at her really funny. I was like, huh? And she says, well, what do you recognize yourself as? And I said, well, my birth certificate says I'm female, and I've got boobs and I've got a vagina. I'm a female. I've been a female now for 60 years. There's no question. I got all the equipment that screams I'm a girl. And I'm not sure that I understand, but I do know that there are people that question whether their body has the right parts because their brain, or it don't have to be your brain, is telling them something else. People, all my life, I have had some friends that are gay. I've gone to school with kids that felt like they were different and they were gay, and I have family members that are gay. I have family members that are of a different race than what I am. Their skin color is different. I have very close friends that their skin color is not the color of mine, and their political beliefs may be different than mine. But the one thing we do have in common is we respect each other and we treat each other the way we would like to be treated by each other. And that is the biggest thing that this whole generation of people that's screaming, and I don't know what they're screaming. I'm not sure they know what they're screaming. It seems like everybody's got a different idea, and that's okay. We're all different, but we have to have some cohesiveness. And when you have a platform, you need to be specific on what you're upset about and what you would like to see changed. But anyhow, in the whole gist of the thing, Ravelry said, if you're a Trump supporter, you no longer fit in here and you need to go. Okay? We are a inclusive society, a group. Well, take note. Like I said, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I suggest that people who use the word inclusive go and look in Webster's dictionary and find out what the definition of inclusive means. Inclusive means, in a nutshell, that it doesn't matter what you believe or what I believe or what color my skin is or your skin is. It doesn't matter what language I speak or what language you speak. It doesn't matter whether I go to church or you go to church or one of us do or one of us don't. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with any of those things. Inclusive means that we all fit in together. We may think differently, we may look different, we may talk different, but we accept each other for who we are. Exclusive means that if you don't meet my standards of what I think you need to meet, then you are excluded from my group and from being around me. That's the difference between inclusive and exclusive. Ravelry has set themselves to be an inclusive group. They have not done what the word means. They have actually made themselves an exclusive group of people. And they have wrapped their arms around the LBGT, and now we got Q. It used to be Q was for queer, and the homosexual group didn't like the queer. It was derogatory in nature, and they did away with it, and then they came up with gay, and they came up with lesbian, and then people, I'm sorry, I don't fit in this world anymore. I feel like an endangered species. But like I said, this is my take on it, and I do know the meaning of words. And like I said, I urge each of you, if you doubt what I say about the word inclusive and the word exclusive, Ravelry has made themselves an exclusive group, not an inclusive. And they have violated their own policy by saying that they are inclusive, but they are excluding anybody who likes Trump. I would stand up and say the same thing if it was Obama that they were, saying, if you like Obama, you don't need to be in this group because we're not going to tolerate Obama. I get it. Not everybody's happy with who gets elected as president, okay? We either get 4 years of them or 8 years of them. But we don't get any more than that of them, okay? So there's always a silver lining at the end of the tunnel. So that is my rant about Ravelry. I'm disappointed in them. They have had a monopoly on the industry of crocheters and knitters and pattern designers for a long time, and they, by their own doings, have destroyed the good thing that they've had the market cornered on in a long time by taking the stance that they have taken. With the invention of the internet, we are no longer limited in what we can do and what we can acquire and what we can learn. The World Wide Web is called the World Wide Web for a reason. Ravelry had a monopoly going, and they've lost the monopoly, and they have opened the door for other people. And actually, I'm glad they've opened the door for other people to come in and provide services that are just as good, if not maybe even better, because Ravelry has been known to accept patterns for sale that had copyright protection on them, and they did nothing about it. Patterns are the same thing, just under a different person's name. And I understand that there's only so many stitches to go around this world, y'all. And, they can be easily named one thing or another, and we all copy this, that, and the other. But, no, I think we're going to see some fabulous, fabulous things end up before too long in the knitting and crochet industry, and it will benefit all of us as knitters and crocheters. So with that being said, I'm done. Just please take the time to look up the word inclusive and the word exclusive, and make up your mind for yourself. But don't be a follower. Walk to your own drum beat, and let's all just stop and think about, we all have feelings, and we all are different in numerous and sundry ways. But the one thing that we have in common is that we are human beings. We do have feelings. Our feelings can get hurt. Things that we say sometimes offend people when that was not the intention of what we were saying or trying to say at all. But just be respectful. I try to treat other people the way that I myself want to be treated, and by them and by anybody else. And I will always be respectful towards someone until they become disrespectful towards me. And then I have to make some decisions. I have to make some decisions as to whether to turn around and remove that person from my life, or do I value them enough to sit down and have a conversation with them about what I found was upsetting and why I didn't like it, and listen to their point of view and be able to come to an agreement with each other. And it's okay to disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing. It's just what's wrong is being disagreeable. You can disagree without being a disagreeable person. So on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Happy July. We're all looking, I know, forward to some cooler weather, and I hope we all get that soon. And I'm sure by the time we get it, and it comes in with probably a vengeance for a lot of us, we're going to be saying, oh, I'm so cold, I can't wait till it's summertime again. Yeah, we all do it. It's a vicious circle. It's like the cat or the dog chasing its tail around and around in circles. We all do it. But everybody have a happy July, a safe one. Don't stay out in the sun too long, but enjoy the sunshine. Enjoy each other as friends. Cherish your family and cherish your friends. And until we meet again, have a wonderful day and smile. A smile is contagious. Smile and the world will smile back at you. Bye-bye.